Welcome back, everybody, to our game design walkthrough of Portal. I am the Rambling Louse, and I'm gonna ramble, believe me. Alright, so we are starting now in Test Chamber 4, right where we left off, and we are presented with this scenario here. Now, if you remember in the last chamber, we just finished doing some stuff with making sure that we go through the portals that we know that both portals can be entered from either side. It doesn't really matter. You can go through orange, you can go in blue, you can go in the one you placed, you can go in the one that was placed for you. Anything works. And so now we're presented with this scenario. This is the next chamber. And so here, I mean, you can see some pretty obvious design going on here. First of all, you can't help but stand on the button as you go through. You can hardly get around it without having to step on the button, which opens the door, demonstrates stepping on the button, opens the door. You can see that. This glass is here so that you can obviously see the door as it opens, but cannot put a portal there. You can't say put a portal on the other side and just portal your way through it and solve the puzzle instantly like that. Now this is here, basically, you're being introduced to the idea that you might be tempted to place, now that you have the portal gun, some smart players might think, oh, maybe I could place it. And and the glass there sort of says, okay, if there's glass, you can't place a portal through it. That's sort of what one of the properties of glass. You can see through it, you can see what's on the other side, but you can't place a portal there. And that's one of the things that they're reinforcing here. But the basic goal of this chamber, what this chamber teaches you, is that you've done stuff with combining portals and the whole cube button mechanism, but you haven't had the ability to place the portal yourself yet, and that's what you have to do here. You have a cube button puzzle with a portal that you're going to have to use, but you have to place the portal yourself. And that is what you have to do here. Now, I've always talked about how some of the early test chambers, as they're just sort of teaching you the ropes of the mechanisms of the portals and portal gun, that they are sort of set up so that a lot of times you can't really help but do the right thing. Even though you have control over what you do and you have to do something in order to solve the puzzle, you find yourself in situations where the only thing you can really do is the correct thing to do in order to solve the puzzle. And that's partly what happens here. Now, some smart players will figure out that they can just place a portal underneath the cube, and the cube's there, and they can put it on the button, the puzzle's solved. Some players won't figure this out immediately, though. If you've played Portal, all of this seems unbelievably basic to you, but you have to realize that, try and remember back to when you first played it, that you have to learn this stuff. You might do it a lot, you're doing it a lot faster than I'm explaining it, of course, but you still have to learn it, and if it's taught wrong, it's going to be incredibly confusing to the player. And the reason that this seems so trivially easy to you is because the game designers of this game did such a good job with teaching you, when you went through this the first time, how to play the game and what you can do with the various mechanisms that they present you. Now, as I started before that rant, some players won't figure out placing a portal beneath the cube, and instead they'll drop down like I just did into this pit in order to try and pick up the cube, and then now what? That portal won't be there. It'll be somewhere else, and they'll think they have no idea what to do. They can't move anywhere, and now we're placed in a situation that we've seen twice before. It should seem awfully familiar now. We're in a pit. There's nothing we can do. We can't move anywhere. There's nowhere we can go except to place a portal and walk through it. Now, if you don't bring the cube, you won't solve the puzzle, but it's a pretty small mental leap to realize that if you bring the cube with you, you've got it. You've solved the puzzle. And again, so it's set up so that you can't help. The only thing you can do once you're down here is place a portal and walk through it. And at this point, you can see the button right in front of you. You have the cube right here, and you realize, oh, I can just throw the cube on the button. And you've basically been guided to without knowing it, to solve the puzzle, because you couldn't really do anything else there. Once you've fallen down there by mistake and placed that portal, you have automatically been prodded to place the correct portal required to solve this puzzle. And now you notice, of course, the placement of the button compared to the automatic orange portal that was placed for you. They're right next to each other. So, you have to have passed it on the way through the level, so you're familiar where both of them are. And then once you exit through the portal at the bottom of the pit, and you step out with the cube, you are right there. Also, it's set up so that if you fall down, and you're stuck, and you place the portal, you can see the button there. They could have placed the orange portal somewhere over here, but that wouldn't have had this effect. It's set up so that when you go down here and you place the portal to get out, not even thinking about the cube at this point, you see the button there, and you have the cube right here. And then you just need to think, oh, I can just walk through with the cube, throw it on the button, and I'm done the chamber. And that's how you solve it. And again, audio cue.
As part of a required test protocol, we will not monitor the next test chamber. You will be entirely on your own. Good luck.
We will be entirely on our own. Now, I started ranting in the previous episode. Not started ranting, but I mentioned a rant that I might do at some point about how to teach the player about your game, and sort of the way that Portal approaches having the player learn about the mechanics of its game, and that I said that Portal did it right. Now, if you've played a lot of particularly AAA games, but just games in general that have come out, it's more common recently, but you see it everywhere. The most common approach to teaching a player is just sort of like to tell them in text how to do it. You have a tutorial mission or a tutorial section of the game. You have text things that come up that say, here's a portal. Press this button to place this portal, press this button to place the other portal. You can walk through one portal and come out the other. You can pick up a cube with this button and place it on the button, and the button will open the door. Like, they could just go through that and they just explicitly tell you what you can do in the game. And that works. Like, that will usually teach the player what they need to know, but it's no fun. And with games, one of the great things about games is that we can do so much better than this. This is one of the areas where games stand out from other forms of media, and this is something that game design has yet to, or game designers, I guess, have yet to fully embrace. And that is the idea that you can teach a player through the game mechanics, through the gameplay, just through them doing things, rather than explaining it to them in the way that might be common for, say, a board game. Now again, there's nothing wrong, per se, with explaining how to do something in text. It's just, there are so many better ways. And Portal is a prime example of this. You've been seeing it up until now, and you're going to keep seeing it. They just do such a better job, and it's so much more fun. By not providing text for the player, and instead letting them sort of discover everything on their own, it's just so much more fun. The sense of discovery that you get when you realize all of these new elements of the mechanics and all of these things that you can do with portals, it's just so much fun. You, instead of saying some game or GLaDOS or whatever, saying, if you place this portal here and this one here, you can walk through one and come out the other, and then you place it, the tutorial says, great, now walk through it. You walk through it, you come out the other side. It's still cool. You go, oh, cool. But it's just so much better to be provided. You're just giving the button prompt, that's it. And then you figure out on your own. I mean, you're guided implicitly through the game design, but you basically figure out on your own that you can place a portal, walk through it, and you come out somewhere else. And that's damn cool. And it's so much cooler to figure that out on your own than it is to just be told it by the game. And that's really the key about Portal, is that in every chamber you're discovering something new about the game mechanics. And you're not being told it. They could have told you it, but they don't. They set up a situation that lets you just basically discover it on your own. You are guided, but you don't really realize you're being guided. And that's the key point. It's set up so that you will discover this stuff, but it is you that will discover it, not someone else telling it to you. And it just makes it so much more fun to play. Anyways, that's that rant complete. Let's actually look at this chamber now. So now we have a slightly different scenario where we have 2 buttons required to open this door. It's not a huge mental leap. I mean, the player hasn't seen this yet, but they know the whole button door mechanic at this point. The checkboxes make this clear. It's not much of a mental leap to realize that if you press on both, you'll get what you want. Now, there are 2 cubes, weighted storage cubes. One placed down in the pit, one placed up here. Now, the one in the pit should look awfully familiar. It's exactly like the last chamber. Players at this point will probably figure out that they can just do that, or whatever, or go through it. And they get that cube, and they're familiar with that. And then they're going to look around, and they're going to say, all right, so yeah, okay, cool, I got it on the button, that's the first one. And at this point, if they weren't sure about the doors, they can stand on this button, now they can see that. They can see that they can open the door. So, all right, we need to get the second cube. Now, the second cube's up here. This is again sort of playing to the same point of making sure that you know you can go through both portals in both directions. Because this mirrors, I guess it was 2 test chambers ago, except just a different scenario with cubes and everything. You have one where you go down, you place the portal, you go through the portal that you placed, and you have another where you have to get up there, place a portal, and then go through the portal that was placed for you in order to get the cube. And that is basically the main mental leap of this stage. The first one down in the pit, you just did in the last test chamber, that's no problem. It's this second one. and it's sort of being able to see the next logical step from the pit to doing it up there. And that is realizing that you need 2 sets of portals in order to solve this problem. One to get up to the orange one, and then you replace it over there, and one to go through the orange one and pick up the cube and drop that on the button, and you've solved it. Now at this point you're pretty comfortable with the idea of opening the door, and this test chamber isn't actually complete yet. So there's no GLaDOS voiceover, and on top of that, GLaDOS made a joke, I believe, earlier in this level about how she's not going to guide you and not going to tell you anything, and then I think they end up lying about that. Anyway, so then there's this part. And now this section right here is very interesting. Ignore the radio. Yeah, there she goes, making that joke. So this is a very, very interesting section. This is your first exposure to a portal not being on a plain old vertical just wall panel like that. This is your first exposure to that. And that is why, again, notice this room looks an awful lot like the rooms I've been mentioning before, where you're kind of stuck and you can't help. You just place a portal and you walk through it because there's nothing else you can do in this room. But this, again, this room is set up in a way so that you... Well, as I said, you can't help but get out, but when you do place a portal, no matter where you place it, it doesn't matter. When you walk through it, this is very much like the very first portal that you saw in the game in Test Chamber 0. As you walk through it, you can't help but see yourself, this time instead of from the side, from the top down. And that's why this roof has to be glass, so that you can see yourself from the top down. As you walk through the portal, you realize, whoa, that's me down there, and you look up, you can see the orange portal, and that's me there too. And sort of reinforcing that, because this is your first exposure to that. They wanted to make sure that this is clear. And so you're given a puzzle here where you can't help but do the right thing, and you walk through and you drop down. And then you can see down the glass, that was where I was a second ago. It's very clear and everything, so on and so forth. Also, I didn't mention this, but when you're, actually, no I can't. When you're down there, the fact that there is a glass roof sort of looks a bit, it's in your field of vision naturally, and it looks a bit different than the cement or the high roofs that have been sort of normal so far. And therefore it prompts you a little bit more to look up, and therefore be more likely to see this orange portal that's been placed there. That's why you're still underneath the glass. But anyways, that's solved. As you get through the later chambers in the game, you'll start seeing less and less of this sort of guidance where you can't help but do the right thing. That starts going away and being replaced with situations where you actually just could do whatever you wanted, and then you just have to figure out what the right thing is. There's none of this not being able to do anything except the right thing. But that's part of teaching you. They sort of, without you realizing it, kind of guide you through the game and level design, and then they sort of start letting go as the puzzles get harder and you progress through the game. And they essentially totally let go. If you haven't played the game, go play it now. They essentially totally let go once you escape in Test Chamber 19 and you start doing your own thing. And that's where you're basically applying everything that you've learned up until this point, and you're applying it in real scenarios with basically no guidance. Alright. Now, this is your first introduction to the good old pellet. I think it's called pellet, right? Yeah, the pellet, whatever the pellets are, the energy pellets. And this is again a super simple test chamber. There's a link between that, but players aren't totally clear about how that works yet. Also, the elevated platform, which is becomes a staple later. You'll notice that these the receivers for the pellets shine an orange light. That's just a convenience. It gives the player, they might not know this yet, but it gives the player somewhere to be able to line up their shot. This becomes useful later on, because lining up your shot can be hard if you're at really oblique angles and trying to set stuff up. And you'll see that in one of the later videos with one of the later chambers. And this one, again, the first portal has already been placed for you. It's just a matter of placing the second one. If you place, the portal's closed when you start because you haven't placed your blue portal. And if you place your blue portal anywhere else, you will see the pellet go through it. It has to go through it because that orange portal isn't going to move, and come out wherever your blue portal is. So you'll see the pellet go wherever your blue portal is. It might be the wrong place, but you'll see it go somewhere, and that sort of prods the player to think, okay, if I can make it go through and it comes out the blue, and I want it to go in there, because I mean there's very obvious graphics and everything, then if I put it up there, it will bounce down there, and the player can usually figure that out. And then this drops, and you've been taught about both the pellets and these sort of elevated things here, the lifts. Another important point that Portal does just so well. If you're familiar with Jonathan Blow or his work Braid, you should go play those as well, or listen to some of his talks. He has some fascinating things to say about game design. And if you haven't picked up on it now, I basically just spit out a lot of the stuff that he says because it's just so right. It's just, once you listen to them, you'll realize just how right he is about game design and the sort of his opinions on it and what can be done about it. But one of the big things that he says is that in a sort of a good puzzle game, like he did this in Braid, and it's very obvious they did this in Portal as well, every new puzzle should teach you something new about the game mechanics. In some puzzle games, you get sort of filler puzzles where you learn the first mechanic, and that's cool, and you're taught it well. But then you just sort of do stuff with it again and again and again. It's different situations, but it's just applying the same thing that you've learned over and over again. But a really good puzzle game has you discovering something new about the game mechanics, that sense of discovery that I talked about that is so addicting in a puzzle game. They have you doing that every single puzzle. And any puzzle that doesn't do that gets cut from the game. And that is something that Portal executes on very, very well. So here you're learning about if you go back in each chamber, you can see the new thing that is introduced every chamber, and the sort of new way that you can use portals or the various elements in the game to do something interesting or to solve puzzles. In here, they're essentially reinforcing the pellet receiver thing in order to power something up, but you already knew that from the last one. It's just on a different wall. It's on a horizontal and a vertical wall instead of two horizontal walls. In addition to that, the pellet now has to pass through the portals in the opposite direction, through the one that you place and out the one that was placed for you, as opposed to how it was done in the last chamber, which is the other way around. Now, I mentioned earlier that the orange light emitted by the pellet receiver serves as a way to sort of mark on the wall where you can place the portal to line it up with the receiver. This is the real reason that these pellets, if you'll notice, leave marks on the wall when they bounce. This is the other side of that. Because here the portal is placed here, so there's no orange light there, and there's no need for it because the portal is already placed for you. But here you're placing the portal at the entrance instead of the exit for the pellet, which is something else that you're being reinforced as well. You're sort of learning about. And in order to make it clear where you should place the portal, in case you have trouble aiming or whatever, because they don't really want you guessing and checking along the wall, because that's just annoying. They have the marks, so that if there's no portal there yet and you're supposed to place it, the pellet will leave a mark there, and that tells you exactly where you should aim the portal in order to open it. Now, again, this one isn't too much of a leap. They switch the entrance and exit portals from the last level, and they make it so that the walls have different orientations. But that's not that big of a leap. You basically know how to do that. And then the second part of the puzzle is getting onto there. Now, the reason that there is sort of non-portable surface there, which is again, they don't have to teach you that this is non-portable surface, because you can just figure that out. The graphics are very clear. It's very clear that a portal is not forming there. There's the icon, the crosshair that changes as you go from one to the other. They don't have to explicitly teach you this. You can just figure it out on your own. It's very clear from the way they've set stuff up. With the sort of particles disintegrating, it's kind of sad. It's like, oh, it didn't work. Whereas there, it's a very, very nice effect when it opens. But anyways, the reason that this is all non-portable surface at the top here, and portalable there, that's a weird word, is so that you obviously can't cheat, and you can't just drop through that one and land on the platform and bypass the whole puzzle. But a secondary effect of having this set up like that is that it draws your attention to this part of the wall. It's not symmetrical or anything. I mean, the normal design would be to have a grid there, but instead they have this part sticking out here, also with sort of an orange tinge. And it's sticking out, and you're thinking, oh, why would it stick out? Why would they leave this area here that you can put a portal on? Maybe it's because they want me to put a portal there. Oh, and then I drop down, and then you drop down. And again, remember that up until this point, the player hasn't had that much exposure to vertical portals. They've been mostly dealing with horizontal. We had that one exposure a level or two ago, and that's basically it. So this is probably the second time, well, hey, you can see yourself, that you've really dropped through a vertical portal. And this time you're going vertical to vertical instead of horizontal to vertical. And you drop down onto there. And if you miss, there's no penalty. That sort of ropey laser thing doesn't kill you or anything. You just drop through and nothing happens. And like that, the puzzle is solved. Anyways, that is it for this session of Portal. I will be back in the next episode. Until then, enjoy.